Hey guys, thanks for joining me today on our segment of Hope for the Moment. As you can see from the title, it's Is Grace Enough? So we'll be looking at that topic today, but I would like to remind you to take a look at our other videos. If you haven't seen them before, make sure you look at our channel on YouTube, Hagerman Baptist Church, and you can see some of the other videos that we've uploaded. Special shout out to Kelly for uploading a video for us last week that she shared about what she was challenged with and encouraged with during her time in college so far. So if you haven't seen it, I would definitely encourage you to go ahead and take a look at that. And we'll continue doing these on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And also you can see on our channel the videos from our Sunday services are there. And even starting on Wednesday, we'll have a moment or a missionary time for the kids. That'll be at 6:30. So plenty of opportunities for the whole family to be able to catch up and be encouraged by God's Word as we continue working through these unique times that we're in now. So today we're talking about the idea of grace. And first off, though, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my time in high school. I played soccer, was my sport of choice back in the day. And I thought I was pretty good. I went to Walnut Ridge Baptist Academy, and it's now called Waterloo Christian School. But at that time, I was playing quite a bit in soccer, and I got to start most of my high school career and pretty much play all the time through. So I thought that that my skills, my abilities, my talents, everything was, it was up there in regards to a lot of the players. And so my junior year, I wanted to join the West High School soccer team. They played in the spring, we played in the fall, so I was able to play with them a little bit there. And I guess play probably isn't the right word to use. I spent the majority of my time on the bench there with the varsity team, but it was a great experience. One of the games, though, wasn't necessarily ideal when I think about the experience. As I was sitting on the bench, my usual place there, coach called my name, and I thought that meant I was going in. It seemed like the person that was coming off was the position that I was going to be filling in. But the only reason coach called my name was because he needed the jersey on my back to give to a freshman on the team there. And at that moment, I was feeling pretty insufficient as far as my talents. And truth be told, the freshman was far greater than me in regards to my sports skills there. But I imagine that all of us at some point in time have felt that insufficiency, and not just in regards to sports, whatever area of your life it might be in. We've all been there where we felt a little bit inadequate. What is it that causes us to feel that way? Is it a lack of training? Is it just looking at the abilities of those around us that causes us to feel maybe a little bit under par? Whatever it might be, we've all been there. And things have changed even so much now recently where the new norm might be a lot different than what you're used to. And because of that, you might be put in situations where you feel underprepared, you feel unequipped. And it's a unique time. It's a challenging time for a lot of us. But I'd encourage you, I'd tell you, you're not the first one to be there, and you're not the only one that's been there. And I want to look now at 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Probably for a lot of you, it's going to be a familiar passage. But 2 Corinthians chapter 12, we're going to look at verses 7 through 10. So if you have a Bible, I would encourage you to open it up and join us here. If not, just listen as I read through this passage. It says, "So to keep me from being too elated," and Paul's writing here, "to keep me from being too elated by the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong.'" An interesting perspective from Paul here, where he gets to the point that he realized in spite of his weaknesses, God was still working. And even further than that, because of his weaknesses, God's strength was even more clear in his life. And it's not until we get to that point where we realize there is nothing that we can do on our own outside of God's grace, where then God shows through us the power that he can work in us. And it's an interesting perspective. It's one that's not common to us, one that we have to work on, obviously. But when we think about this idea of God's grace being sufficient, God's grace being all that we need, as he promises us there in 2 Corinthians 12, we might get the idea that there's kind of a supply and demand issue there. Because if you've been to the grocery store over the past few weeks, you've seen what it looks like when supply is lacking, when there's insufficient supplies to run around. But fortunately for us, we don't have to worry about God's grace running low, where God's grace might be, there's such a high demand for God's grace that maybe there's not enough for me today. We don't have to worry about that first because of what we see here in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. It says, "For my grace is sufficient for you." God is telling us that is all that we need. His grace is complete. It is sufficient. It is all that we need. So he gives us that promise right there. Second, though, are the words in Lamentations chapter 3, verses 21 through 24. And it gives us a great comfort. So I'd like to take a look at that as well. Lamentations chapter 3, verses 21 through 24. I'm going to read that here. It says, "But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him." What encouraging words, what great words that we have here in this portion in Lamentations. And it reminds me, and I would remind you of what Pastor preached about a couple of weeks ago, but he referenced this passage specifically in verse 23 in regards to the fact that we never have to fear that God's grace, that God's mercies will run out, or that we've, used up all that we can. We got to the point where God says, I've given you all that I'm going to give you. Kind of tomorrow you're on your own. We can use up all of God's grace. We can use up all of God's mercy for today because we know at the moment that we rise tomorrow, when our eyes open, his mercies are new. His grace is there for us. We can never use up God's supply. We can never run out, no matter who is calling upon God's grace, who is calling upon God's mercy. He's not going to say, well, I've given too much out. This is all that we have. He's not going to limit us. Only take one portion of God's grace today. He's not going to do that because his supply is never ending. His grace is sufficient and his mercies are new every morning. I would encourage you to lift your eyes from yourself. When we focus on ourselves, then we realize the insufficiencies, we realize the inadequacies. So take your eyes from yourself and fully lean on God's promises today. Thanks again for joining us and Hope for the Moment today. And I would trust that you realize that God's grace is sufficient for you. Look forward to catching up with you later this week as well, and we'll continue doing this each and every Tuesday and Thursday for the foreseeable future here. So again, hopefully it's been an encouragement and a challenge for you today. Continue living in hope.